You're watching Pure X Mysteries, where the strangest stories and darkest encounters come to life. Tonight's story is one you'll never forget. The stories you're about to hear aren't from books or movies, they're from real people who swear these encounters actually happened. Late-night roads, haunted places, strange rules, sometimes the scariest part is that they sound just a little too real. Tonight, we'll start with a story about a petrol pump on the highway, one you should never stop at after dark. The Haunted Petrol Pump. With rules. I was driving back from Pune to Mumbai late at night. The highway was almost empty, and I realized my fuel tank was dangerously low. Around 1:30 in the morning, I spotted a small, run-down petrol pump with a flickering sign. It looked old, like it hadn't been updated in decades. I almost drove past it, but I didn't have a choice. When I pulled in, I noticed a wooden board nailed to the side of the office. On it were 4 handwritten rules. 1. Do not look at the attendant's face. 2. Never check your fuel gauge after midnight. 3. If another car arrives while you're here, leave immediately. 4. Always pay in cash. At first, I thought it was some kind of joke. But something about the handwriting felt wrong, uneven, shaky, almost desperate. The attendant came out, an older man in uniform, his cap pulled low over his face. I tried not to stare, remembering the first rule. He silently began filling my tank. I glanced at my dashboard, and that's when I noticed my mistake. My fuel gauge had moved, even though the second rule warned against looking. The needle shook violently before slamming back to full. The air felt heavy, like the night itself was pressing down on me. Just then, headlights appeared in my mirror. Another car pulled into the station. My heart sank. The third rule. If another car arrives, leave immediately. But I was trapped. The other vehicle pulled up close behind me, blocking my exit. I tried to stay calm, but when I looked at the rearview mirror, I froze. The car didn't have a driver. The engine was on. The headlights were bright. But there was no one inside. I quickly shoved cash into the attendant's hand without looking at him, slammed the gear into drive, and sped out of there. As I left, I glanced at my fuel gauge one last time. It wasn't on full. It was flashing 3 words I'll never forget. See you soon. The disappearing passenger. It was past midnight when Rajesh, a cab driver, picked up a passenger near the city bus stand. A young woman, dressed in white, waved him down. She quietly gave him an address. It was a neighborhood on the outskirts of town. Her voice was soft, almost distant. Rajesh didn't think much of it. He was just glad to get a late-night ride. As they drove, he noticed something strange. In the rearview mirror, the woman seemed blurry. Like the glass refused to focus on her. Trying to ignore it, he kept driving. The road grew darker. The city lights faded away. When they reached the old cemetery road, the woman suddenly whispered, "Stop here." Rajesh pulled over. He turned around to ask for the fare. But the back seat was empty. Shaking, he looked around in disbelief. And then his phone buzzed. It was a new booking request. Same pickup location. Same passenger name. The passenger who had just vanished. Room 6, The Haunted Hostel. It was 2 a.m. when Ajay woke up to the sound of knocking inside his hostel room wall. At first, he thought it was rats. But the sound was heavy, slow, deliberate. And it was coming from behind his bed. Ajay had just moved into the hostel last week. It was an old building, once a hospital during the war. The rent was cheap, the location close to college, and that was all that mattered to him. When he first checked in, the warden gave him a strange look. "You're in room 6, he asked. Ajay nodded. The warden hesitated, then leaned closer. "Whatever happens, never look under the bed after midnight." Ajay laughed nervously, thinking it was just a joke to scare newcomers. But every night since, strange things had happened. Footsteps in the corridor, even when it was locked. Whispers, too faint to understand. And the feeling that someone was always watching him while he slept. That night, the knocking grew louder. Bang! 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 Ajay sat up, heart racing. He turned on the light. The sound stopped. The room looked normal, just cracked walls, an old desk, and the rusty bed. He sighed, switched off the light, and lay down again. Seconds later, he heard breathing. Not his. Slow, heavy, coming from under the bed. Ajay froze. He remembered the warden's words. His body screamed to run, but his curiosity was stronger. He grabbed his phone, switched on the flashlight, and leaned over the edge. The beam of light trembled as it hit the floor. At first, he saw nothing. Just dust and darkness. But then, two pale eyes blinked back at him. Ajay gasped. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a stranger. It was himself. Another Ajay, lying flat under the bed, face twisted into a wide, unnatural smile. The duplicate whispered, in Ajay's own voice. "I told you not to look." Ajay scrambled back, knocking over his chair. The lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. When they came back on, the space under the bed was empty. But the knocking started again. This time from inside the closet. The next morning, the warden unlocked room 6. The bed was made. The closet was shut. Ajay's belongings were gone. But there were now 2 sets of footprints on the dusty floor. And from beneath the bed came the sound of breathing.